This journal article describes a study looking at the effects of age on second language acquisition in Turkey. Specifically, the effects of starting second language teaching in early versus later grades are explored. Professors Cepik and Sarandı were motivated in part by the relatively poor EFL achievements of the Turkish education system, ranking 43rd out of 44 countries in the English Proficiency Index as put together by EF Education First in 2011. Secondarily, teachers were asked to evaluate the perceived difference in SLA ability among students who began their studies earlier versus later. The results of the research showed that the students who began their SLA earlier did not perform significantly better than the late starters in any SLA areas. The teachers, however, felt that early learners had a lower affective filter towards English compared to the late starters. As with much of SLA theory, the findings were not particularly conclusive regarding the initial research question, but they did reveal information about student behavior at different ages of SLA commencement. The authors claim that other studies that examine the relationship between age and language learning are mainly conducted in ESL teaching environments, in other words, where English is either the dominant or native language or the lingua franca. The findings of those studies then are applied to EFL classrooms where both the environment and the purpose of SLA are significantly different. Cepik and Sarandı's preliminary perusal of the literature on the question of the relationship of age and second language learning revealed a general finding that when the length of instruction is constant, the early starters are at an advantage. Critical period hypothesis is the central idea in much of the language learning theory literature the authors found. CPH argues that a critical period exists in first language learning, usually demarcated by puberty, after which language acquisition skills are significantly diminished as a result of neurophysiological development, according to Lenenberg, 1967. The authors also found support for the existence of CPH in SLA as well, according to Birdsong, 2006. However, they were also aware of significant studies that looked at native-level SLA by adults, such as those conducted by Slavoff and Johnson in 1995. 6 English language teachers who had the experience of teaching the subject students were given questionnaires asking about their perceptions of their students' abilities. The specific questions were the following. Are there any differences between the students who have had previous experience of learning English and those who were exposed to English in the 4th grades, the late starters? If yes, in which language areas are the differences more noticeable? Do the differences create any problems in terms of teaching? How do you usually deal with these problems? Does the difference between these students carry over to the next levels, later classes? If yes, how is the existing proficiency gap filled, if at all? 2 sets of 11-year-old 6th grade English language learners at a private school in Gaziantep, Turkey, were chosen by the authors, all of whom received their education immersed in English, not Turkish. Of the 83 students, roughly half began their SLA at 5 to 6 years of age, while the remaining students began studying English between 9 and 10 years of age. In order to establish a baseline or snapshot of the L2 attainment of the students, a series of tests, close, reading, vocabulary, writing, and speaking, were given to evaluate the students' current levels of English language learning. The data from the qualitative questionnaires given to the teachers showed that while there were no discernible differences based on the tests given to the students, most of the teachers felt that early learners had some advantage in pronunciation skills and vocabulary. All of the teachers, though, felt that grouping students according to their SLA ability level was very important. The data also indicated that there were no discernible differences in the second language attainment between the two groups, early and late learners. Cepik and Sarandı conclude that because there were no discernible differences between the early and late language learners at the elementary school level, there may have been a lack of intensity and quality in the programs used for the early starters that could have led to a proficiency difference. As a result, the authors felt that class materials, syllabi, and teaching resources needed to be reevaluated. They did caution, however, that one must not make sweeping generalizations regarding early and late SLA instruction commencement based on their study, because their testing methodology could not measure the pronunciation skills and the low affective filter of early learners as described by the teachers on their questionnaires. Cepik and Sarandı found that the preponderance of the literature on early versus later SLA commencement showed that early learners displayed an advantage. What role do you think age plays in the effective teaching of native language? What role does age play in second language learning? Does the critical period hypothesis preclude second language learning at an advanced age? In their conclusion, the authors try to explain the lack of difference between test scores of their two subject groups as possibly a lack of quantity and intensity in the materials to which the early language learners were exposed. Do you think this is a reasonable explanation of the results? Why or why not? The authors quote an English-first study that places Turkey far behind many other developed countries in English language learning. If you could devise a strategy to advise the Turkish Ministry of Education on the appropriate time to introduce English language learning to students, what age would that be? Why?